Hello, I'm Ted Leverette, broadcasting from partneroncall.com. I'm the original business buyer advocate. For more than 30 years, I've been helping people find and buy the right businesses the right way. I'm talking to Peter Nola, a business broker in Auckland, New Zealand. His firm is ABC Business Sales, and they have offices throughout New Zealand. Peter's been ABC's Marketer of the Year numerous times. I've been watching his how-to videos for quite a while, and I like what I see. And that's why I've invited him to talk to us about what he and I have been observing during the pandemic and the financial crises. We're going to talk about how we see the economic recovery affecting small and mid-sized businesses, and especially if you want to buy or sell small and mid-sized businesses in the foreseeable future. You might glean some lessons or maybe some ideas from our conversation that can help your business anywhere in the world. You know, one of the reasons I'm talking to Peter is something I took off his website. He says, you can only sell your business once. So it makes sense to do everything you can to get the most for it when you do sell. And that kind of relates to the other side of the deal-making table, the buy side where I am. And I say to searchers, you cannot buy the right business the right way if you cannot find the right business. Okay, we're going to talk about what's been happening and what we think's coming. You're going to hear us talk about observations from the pandemic. We're going to talk about time on market, how long it takes to sell a business. We're going to talk about pricing and valuation and so-called experts. We're going to talk about the transition of ownership. What happens when the business changes hands? We're going to also talk about the market for sellers and buyers, the hidden market, and you're going to see a worldwide perspectives. What are we learning from what we've just gone through?
And to be fair, we've not seen much change in what we do. I mean, sure, there's a lot of changes in businesses. There's closed businesses. There's some that are struggling to trade, all that sort of thing. But almost from the day we came out of level 3 and into level 2, you'd argue business is back to normal for us in terms of how we're doing things. Sure, buyers are cautious. What's happening? How was the business affected? Bankers seem to be bursting with cash and desperate to give it away. But they still want to know, what is the business doing post-COVID? So I think we'll have sort of 3 months of a lot of noise and a lot of work, but not a lot of result. And then once we settle into some sort of economic pattern, then I think we'll be pretty much back to normal. That's kind of what it feels like. I don't see any major changes coming. I could be wrong, but I don't see any major changes coming.
Here in the States, on the buy side, it's a wait and see. The buyers are saying, you know what, it's discretionary for me to buy a business. I don't have to. And except for the owners who must sell their business, a lot of them are they're not willing to list the business, and they're holding back to see what's coming next. That's not happening as much in New Zealand, huh?
No, I think we're in a bit of a hiatus in terms of waiting and seeing, but I think that's not going to last too long. I mean, what we are seeing is a bump. So we had our government came out and had a wage subsidy available to every business. So effectively, you could get a 12-week wage subsidy for your staff, and that paid about 80% of their wages. So you could retain your staff while you were closed down. Now that subsidy doesn't expire for another 2 weeks, around about June 10, 12. And so obviously you can't make people redundant if you've taken a wage subsidy. So I think we're going to see a bump in redundancies and unemployment at the end of that. If you go back to 2008, 9, 10, when we had those redundancies, we saw a lot of people buying a job. So those couple of $100,000, man in a van, man in a boy kind of businesses. And I think we'll see those coming through quite strongly once we get that bump. Although the government's been a little cunning, they've announced an extension to the wage subsidy, which by coincidence goes through to the general election, which we've got coming up in October. So it's almost like they're going to hide or defer that bump in unemployment till after the election, which is, if I was cynical, I'd say that's what they've done. If I was not cynical, I'd probably say that it was a good idea, again, to smooth out that sort of flow. I mean, at the end of the day, they're going to pay an unemployment benefit or they're going to do a wage subsidy. The cost is about the same to them, but it's probably better to have people, working for somebody or trying to work for somebody. So I think once we get that unemployment jump, we'll see a bit of a boom in those lower end businesses. Conversely, that will hurt the top end because that's what happens. So there's always an effect somewhere. Too hard to tell.
What do you mean, Peter, by the top end? What was the point?
So the higher value businesses. So, if we're selling a business with 15 or 20 staff, that's going to be harder to sell now because there's just the uncertainty, those sort of things. We're having a bit of a dip in our house prices. Bank lending in New Zealand most of it is secured to bricks and mortar. So if you want to buy a business, you'll go to the bank. The bank will go, great business. I can see that you can repay the money, but what are you going to offer for security? Where's your house? Where's your building? Where's your personal guarantee? So they tie everything up in a neat little bow. So people are, you can't just buy something and think, well, this doesn't work, and chuck the keys through the door of the bank on the way past. You don't have that ability here. If you get it wrong, it can be fairly serious. So that makes buyers a lot more cautious, of course.
What do you think is going to happen maybe for the small businesses and then the little bit larger ones for time on market? You get a listing. Do you think there's going to be a change from what it was, let's say 6 months ago, time on market? And for how long do you think that might change, if at all?
Yeah, interesting. I mean, we would have I guess we'd have an average of about 3 months on the market from go to woe. As things get a bit tighter again, if you go back to the GFC, we were probably 4 months on market. The best I've ever seen it was probably 2.5 months on market. So it's going to depend on the business, though. It's back to pricing, isn't it? If you price something fairly and attractively, it'll be on the market less than if you try and get very, very top end value. That always takes a bit longer.
In terms of pricing, are you seeing owners you're talking to that you either want to list or maybe even have listed who are willing to price it to sell it? Here in the States, and I'll tell you why I asked the question. There's been quite a few business brokerage webinars in the last month during the crisis where the brokers have been talking to one another. And what they've said is, don't take listings unless the sellers understand you got to price it to sell it. The days of us listing you and playing around with buyers, they're over. Is the feeling that strong in New Zealand?
Okay, I'm not sure it's that strong. I think there's probably a stronger awareness of meeting the market, which is essentially what you're saying. But then it's kind of always been like that. You'd put a stake in the ground and go, I think it's worth this, but we've got 4 offers for whatever less, then maybe we were wrong and perhaps you ought to take less, and an occasion you get a multi-offer and you get more, and maybe we put it a bit low. So I think most sellers are smart enough to understand meeting the market. Where they fall down is again when they get a bit stubborn in their thinking, and but I kind of blame the broker for that, because they should have had them understanding we can set a price, but we can't guarantee somebody will want to pay that price. So, they need to be a bit understanding, and I don't think that'll change. I think that's just the way we've always operated.
Well, Peter, are you saying that in New Zealand that businesses that get listed are more like they're most likely to sell?
And I don't know how many times I've sat down and I can think of dozens and dozens of examples. The best one is I had a vendor who, his accountant was a very large corporate accountant, super high office tower sitting on the top floor, a couple of hundred accountants in there. He put a value on the business. I looked at it and I said, well, I don't think we're going to get that. I think it's worth this. And we went to market. A buyer came along, he came back, he had this big report from his accountant who said it was worth way less than what I said it was worth. But the irony was that both the vendor's accountant and the seller's accountant were in the same firm. They were just on different floors. So they hadn't actually talked to one another. And that, I think, is where the problem lies. You get back to what you said, you get their experts who aren't necessarily experts in the field that you're asking them for. I mean, you look at an accountant, accountants are very good historians. They know what happened. They can tell you exactly what, how, where, and they're pretty good under the hood. Tweak this, change that, gross profit, do this, do that. But can they value a business? Do they sell a business? Well, no, they don't. It's a bit like asking a mechanic to fix your car and then tell you what the car's worth. You're going to go to a car salesman to find the value of the car, but you're going to go to a mechanic to get it working. And that's how I see the accountants. Accountants are your mechanics, your broker is your salesman. And when the two cross, it's not always pretty,
But I just want to be sure that I'm on record here. Not all brokers in the United States don't sell most of their listings. There actually are some, and quite a few, who do sell most of their listings, but they're not the majority. And it's just too bad, because when we come along as buyers and we get to a listed business by a broker who didn't properly price or prepare it, we waste a ton of time to only discover that owner, whatever that owner is smoking, we wish we had some of it, because we're not going to buy it.
To me, that's part of the challenge of doing this, is that it's not like a house. 6 houses in the street, they're all worth $1 million. The seventh one's probably worth $1 million. Now, unless you're looking at a liquor store or a convenience store that you've got 20 sales of pretty much the same thing, putting stats on an import business with widgets as opposed to a manufacturer of medical equipment, it's very difficult to apply blanket stats. So you can come up with, within reason, pretty much a huge range of value on it. And I can say it's worth 5 times earnings. You can go, well, it's only worth 3 for all this. And the owner's going, well, it's worth 8 because of all these reasons, all of which are quite valid, but not necessarily what somebody's going to pay for it or sell it for. And I think that's the challenge. As a buyer's advocate, you go, well, it's worth 4 times all day long. The seller's going, well, I think it's worth 8 times, and the broker's in the middle going, well, I think it's worth 6, and we're hoping to close that gap. And it's so difficult when it's an opinion-based valuation. It's not a fact-based valuation, or as much as it can be.
Today, I got contacted by an exit planner. I don't know if you have exit planners in New Zealand. These are people who, in the last couple of years, it was a field that I never really even heard much of, but now they're dedicated to helping businesses become better businesses, all with the aim of someday the owner cashing out. And she said to me, Ted, what are you seeing on the buyer side for transition assistance after completion? And what she said further was, she said, when I'm working with owners and they've decided to sell, they want to sell. They're done. They don't want to spend a day with that buyer. And I told her, on the buy side, particularly now during this pandemic and financial crisis, we're not buying any business, at least buyers who have any sense, are not buying any business unless there's worthwhile transition assistance. In other words, that owner is going to hang around for a while and do important things and really make sure that that owner helps cement the buyer with the key employees, the key customers, maybe now in the supply chain, the key supplier. And if the owner's not willing to do that, I'm advising my buyers, just go to another business for sale. What do you think about this transition assistance, particularly in the next few months, maybe year?
Interestingly enough, I'm just putting together a script for a video along those lines. And I think we're talking about a transition from generations more than anything else. So you've got a baby boomer generation who's certainly in New Zealand, we rate that Kiwi work ethic. You get up in the morning, you work for 6 days and you have Sunday off and play rugby or whatever. And that ethic is almost an identity. So I'm in the business, I'm part of the business, I'm in it full time, and I'm not giving staff extra work, because why should I get some other bugger to do it when I can do it, and they'll probably muck it up anyway. And so then the buyer comes along, and the buyer's another generation, and they're probably better described as semi-passive investor kind of buyers. You know, they don't want to work full time. They're more interested in work-life balance. So you have two fundamentally different ideologies trying to look at the same business. The only way around that is to get the seller to stay on for 3 or 6 months. The buyer, if he's then smart, will accept a lower return for that 6 months because he's going to pay the buyer, but he can use the seller to then impart that knowledge, not necessarily to him, but he can hire someone as a general manager or to run the business. He then gets the best of both worlds. He gets the seller training his new staff, and he ends up with a business semi-managed, which is what he wants. The seller obviously gets the price. Buyer now has the business of what he wants. But I think that's where it's kind of heading, and those older sellers who haven't put the systems in, who haven't trained their staff, they need to accept a longer transition. But more important, buyers need to understand that as well, and not want maximum return on day one, and pay for that expertise, which is effectively what they're buying, and then go, well, in a year's time, hey, I'm going to be making whatever my return on investment is that I've budgeted for. And I can't see any other way around it, but I call it a generational shift as opposed to anything else. You know, just the old boomers attitude versus the younger people who have possibly, you know, had a corporate background. They've made their money, it's a terrible thing to say, but easier. You know, they've bought a house, the house has doubled in price, they've got equity, they've got all these other sorts of things. So they're more interested in that, as I said, work-life balance.
Most of the buyers I represent are not buying what we call Main Street businesses. They're buying businesses that have a taxable profit of, generally $500,000 a year up to maybe $1 million or $2 million, that range. In the United States, not very many business brokers list very many businesses that report a taxable profit of $500,000 or more. So when a buyer hires me, I tell them, you need to start with every broker in your city, because you never know who may have a listing or have a pocket listing or be able to connect you to an owner. But here's what happens. Most of the time, at least when we come out of the box with a new buyer, they cannot find a broker who has a listing or is friendly with an owner where we can find a deal. So that means we have to go to what we call the hidden market. We have to go directly to owners. Like we're shopping for listings. We go to owners and say, hey, we've been looking for businesses like yours. We can't find it. We're calling you. Could we tempt you to talk to us about selling your business? That's how we source a lot of deals.
Again, I think that's probably pretty similar to here, except we don't have buyer's advocates. We have the good old accountant, who I've probably bagged a bit too hard. He would do that. The accountant would be the closest thing to a buyer's advocate, exit planner, all those sort of things. So they're trying to expand their offering, if you like, to include a lot of other things. I think our average business sale here would be under $500,000 value, which would make the profits sort of, 150,000 in terms of tax paid profits. But the average wage here is half of that. So again, kind of makes sense. And we do, for example, in our firm, we have 20 people that do nothing but cafes. Well, cafes generally are in that lower end, small sort of, so I think that skews the value. Where the numbers that you've sort of talked about is where I prefer to be, but struggle to find. So again, same problem really. I've probably got 2 or 3 buyers that I've talked to in the last 2 weeks who have said, if you've found something similar to what you've explained, but given me an area, they'd buy it. So it is interesting. Yeah, it's again, same problem.
Well, what do those buyers do? They strike out with you?
They look. Yeah, they wait and they look. It's as simple as that. Yeah. Again, as I said, there's probably only 150 brokers in Auckland, so it's not too difficult to look at websites, and there's probably 4 websites, I guess, in Auckland that you look at for a business for sale. So again, good cup of coffee and sort of half an hour, and you're going to search what's currently on the market. And then they contact you, you talk to them. Can you get something like this? Do you see that? And away we go.
This really was fun. You know what? I'm having so much fun interviewing people around the world. Yeah, I never did it until this crisis. Yeah.
I think, well, there's the difference, isn't it? I mean, there's the way things have changed for us I mean, who would have thought that I'd be talking to someone, I won't say on the other side of the world, but halfway around the world, via Zoom. I mean, a year ago, you wouldn't have considered doing it. Yes, we had the technology, but you wouldn't have considered doing it.
Oh, I know. I have a guy in Melbourne, actually, Australia, who attends every one of my Zoom conferences. And I do my Zoom conferences, this is just terrible for you, 11 a.m. my time, which is about 2 in the morning his time.
Yeah, it would be, yeah. Yep.
So he's sitting there in a pretty much dark room, just going like that, nodding his head. But I say to him, you don't need to do it. We tape this stuff. We send it to you. He goes, I want to be there live. And that never happened. I think it has to do with all of a sudden the world is waking up, and we're seeing how there are so many relationships out there that go from nation to nation. And it's kind of interesting to see how things are different, but mostly they're not. Mostly they're not different.
No, you're right. And human nature is the same everywhere. I get comments on my videos from all over the place. And they go, oh, that's exactly like the problem I'm having. And they're in, somewhere else in the world. And I had a guy send me some scripts, and he's from the States actually, and he sent a couple of articles. He said, you can turn these into scripts if you like and see what you think of them. And I read through and I'm going, that's exactly what we face here. It's no different, because human nature is the same everywhere. The rules might be different, but people's behavior is not.
Yeah. Wow. So Peter, how can people contact you?
On the web, you just go to YouTube /my name, Peter Nola, and that'll find me. You can get me at www.abcbusiness.co.nz. But either way, have a go through the YouTube channel. You'll see the videos. If you like what you see, then contact me from there.
Okay, excellent. This is Ted Leverette. I hope what you heard was as enjoyable for you as it was for me, and valuable. Hey, if you're searching for a business right now, or you're planning to search, check out one of my books, How to Prepare Yourself and Find the Right Business to Buy. And my other book is for people evaluating and negotiating deals, How to Buy the Right Business the Right Way. You can get those books at my website, partneroncall.com. I'm Ted Leverette, the business buyer advocate with Partner on Call Network. Thanks for listening, and best wishes for your prosperity.